Monique had always loved her diner. It wasn't big or fancy, just a modest little place on the corner of a quiet street in a small town. But to her, it was everything. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the sizzle of eggs on the griddle, the sound of chatter and laughter. It all made her feel alive. She had taken over the diner from her mother a few years ago, and since then it had become her sanctuary. She knew most of her customers by name, and they knew her. Some came for the food, but most came for the warmth, the way she treated everyone like family. On that particular morning, Monique was behind the counter, wiping it down as she hummed a soft tune. The sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the chrome edges of the booths and making everything feel golden. Outside, the town was waking up slowly, the occasional car rolling by, the birds chirping on the trees lining the street. It was the kind of morning where nothing bad could happen, she thought. Her regulars started to trickle in. There was old Mr. Jenkins, who liked his pancakes extra fluffy, and a group of young men from the local high school who came in for breakfast before heading to work. Monique greeted each of them with a warm smile and a kind word, just like she always did. The diner felt normal, calm, and safe. That's why it was so shocking when she noticed him. He was standing outside near the entrance, a man in his late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing black leather from head to toe. His jacket had patches that she had seen before in magazines, symbols that carried a certain reputation, Hell's Angels. Monique had heard stories about the gang, but she also knew that appearances didn't tell the full story. Still, there was something in the way he was moving, the way he kept looking around nervously, that made her uneasy. He stepped inside the diner quickly, and the bell above the door jingled. The regulars barely glanced at him. It was not unusual to see strangers now and then, but Monique felt a ripple of tension as he approached the counter. He had dark hair, a rough stubble on his jaw, and eyes that seemed tired and anxious. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. "Can I get some coffee?" he asked, his voice low but polite. "Of course," Monique said. She poured him a cup and set it on the counter. "Sit wherever you like." He nodded and chose a booth in the corner, his movements cautious, almost as if he expected someone to come after him. Monique watched him for a moment, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and concern. Something about him made her instincts flare. She had learned over the years that people often came to her diner not just for food, but for a safe place when the world felt threatening. She continued with her morning routine, taking orders, cooking pancakes, and keeping an eye on him at the same time. Every so often he would glance toward the door as if expecting trouble, and each time her heart skipped a beat. She had no idea why he was so nervous, but she had a feeling it wasn't just normal anxiety. As the morning passed, more customers came in, but he remained quiet in the corner, sipping his coffee and glancing around the room. Monique approached him, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "On the house," she said gently. "Looks like you could use it." He looked up at her, surprised. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice a mix of relief and tension. I don't want any trouble." Monique gave him a reassuring smile. "You're safe here. That's all you need to know." For a while, he just sat there quietly, eating, drinking, and trying to calm his nerves. Monique went about her work, serving other customers, refilling coffee cups, and cleaning tables. She could feel the tension in the room, not just from him but in herself too. Something told her that his life outside those walls was dangerous, and somehow she had become part of it. A few minutes later, the diner door swung open again, and a cold breeze came in. Monique glanced up instinctively. 2 police officers stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room. They didn't approach the counter immediately, but seemed to be looking for someone. Monique's heart started racing, but she kept her expression calm. "Can I help you, officers?" she asked, her voice steady. One of them looked directly at her. "We're looking for a man. He's connected to some serious charges. Seen anyone suspicious today?" Monique shook her head slowly, maintaining her composure. "No, sir. Just regular customers. Everyone here comes in for breakfast, coffee, conversation." The officers lingered, their presence uncomfortable. Monique could feel the tension building in the diner. Her customers were starting to notice too, exchanging worried glances. But she didn't flinch. She had been through difficult situations before, and she knew when to stand her ground. Meanwhile, in the corner, the man she had noticed earlier stiffened. Monique's heart went out to him. She didn't know his full story yet, but she knew he needed help. She remembered her mother's words from years ago. Sometimes, helping someone in need is more important than worrying about yourself. That thought gave her courage. After a few moments, the officers left, muttering to each other. The tension slowly faded, but Monique could see that the man was still on edge. She decided it was time to act. "Follow me," she whispered, motioning toward the back of the diner. He hesitated for a second, but then nodded, trusting her instinctively. Monique led him through the small kitchen and into a back room she rarely used, except for storage and extra seating when the diner was crowded. Once inside, she closed the door behind them. "You're safe here," she said softly. "Take a seat. I'll get you some water and food." He sank into a chair, running a hand over his face. "Thank you," he said again, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know where else to go." Monique set a glass of water and a small plate of sandwiches in front of him. "Eat something. You can't think clearly if you're hungry or thirsty." As he ate, Monique studied him carefully. She could see that he was exhausted, not just physically but mentally. There was a story behind those eyes, a story of danger, fear, and perhaps regret. She didn't judge him. She simply wanted to help. For the first time since he came in, he relaxed slightly. He spoke in low tones, explaining that he had been on the run from authorities for reasons he couldn't fully disclose. Monique listened quietly, understanding that sometimes words were not as important as action. She didn't need all the details. She just knew he needed protection, even if only for a short while. Hours passed. The morning sun climbed higher, spilling more light into the diner. Outside, the town went about its day, unaware of the drama unfolding within those walls. Monique kept herself busy with her work, but her mind never left the man in the back room. She felt a strange connection to him, a sense of responsibility that weighed heavily but didn't frighten her. By late morning, the diner had emptied slightly, leaving a few regulars chatting quietly over coffee. Monique checked on him again. He was calmer now, sipping water, watching her move around the room. "You know," he said finally, "most people would have called the police immediately." Monique smiled faintly. "Most people aren't me. I believe everyone deserves a chance, especially if they're in danger. That's just how I was raised." He looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and awe in his eyes. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Monique," she replied simply. "Jack," he said, introducing himself at last. From that moment, a silent understanding formed between them. She didn't need to know the full story, and he didn't need to explain everything. What mattered was that he was safe, and for now that was enough. Monique returned to her work, serving her remaining customers, keeping the diner running smoothly. She could still feel Jack's presence in the back room, a reminder that life could change in an instant. She didn't know what would happen next, but she had made her choice. And deep down, she knew that choice was the right one. By the time the morning rush ended, Monique felt a strange mix of exhaustion and pride. She had protected someone when it mattered most. She didn't know if she would face consequences for it, but at that moment, she didn't care. She had done what her heart told her to do, and that was enough. The sun now shone fully on the diner, the warmth spilling through the windows. Monique stood behind the counter, wiping her hands, glancing toward the back room. Jack was resting quietly, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. The day had started like any other, but it was already different. Somehow she sensed that this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than herself, a story that would test courage, loyalty, and the strength of the human heart. The rest of the morning passed quietly, but Monique knew it was only calm on the surface. Jack, the man she had hidden in the back room, was restless. His eyes darted toward the windows more than once, and each time the diner bell rang, he flinched slightly. Monique had learned long ago to read people, and she could tell he was not only tired but also deeply worried. She brought him another cup of coffee and sat down across from him at the small table in the back. "You need to eat something proper," she said softly. "You can't face whatever's out there on an empty stomach." Jack nodded, taking a small bite of the sandwich she had made for him. "Thank you," he said again, his voice quieter than before. "I'm not used to people helping me." "Not like this?" Monique smiled gently. "Maybe you just haven't met the right person," she said. "Or maybe you haven't needed it until now. Either way, you're safe here." He looked at her for a long moment, as if he was trying to figure out if she was serious. Finally, he sighed, a sound full of exhaustion and relief. "I don't know how long I can stay here without being caught." he admitted. "They're looking for me and I don't have many places to hide." Monique nodded, understanding more than he realized. She had grown up in neighborhoods where people had to make quick choices for survival. She knew fear when she saw it. "Then we'll make sure you're not alone," she said. "I'll keep an eye on things. You don't have to face it by yourself." Jack swallowed hard, clearly not used to this kind of trust. "I don't even know your name," he said again. "Monique," she replied simply. He nodded. "Jack," he said, finally telling her his name. There was a pause, a quiet understanding in the room that words could not capture. They didn't need to speak everything. The moment was enough. Outside, the town went on as usual, but Monique could feel the tension building. She had noticed a patrol car driving slowly down the street earlier, and her instincts told her it wouldn't be the last. She returned to the kitchen to check on the orders she had lined up for the few remaining customers. But her mind kept drifting back to Jack. As the day moved forward, a few curious locals started to linger longer than usual. One or two glanced toward the back of the diner as if sensing something was different. Monique smiled politely, serving coffee and pancakes, but inside she knew the situation was delicate. She had to protect Jack, and she had to maintain normalcy for the sake of her customers. By early afternoon, the diner had calmed down, leaving only a handful of regulars who didn't notice anything unusual. Monique decided it was time to get more proactive. She went back to the small room where Jack was sitting quietly, running a hand through his hair. He looked smaller somehow, the stress and fear of the past days weighing heavily on him. "Listen," Monique said, her voice steady. "We need a plan. I can't let you stay hidden forever, and we have to be smart about this. We can't just hope nothing happens." Jack looked at her, surprise and relief in his eyes. "You actually want to help me?" he asked. "I already am," Monique said firmly. "I'm not going to turn you in. I'm not going to leave you to deal with this alone. But we need to be careful. If the authorities find you here, it won't just be your problem. It will be mine, too." He nodded slowly, his hands tightening around the cup of coffee she had brought him. "I don't know what I would do without you," he said quietly. Monique felt a pang of empathy. She didn't need to know all of his secrets to understand his fear. "We'll figure it out," she said. "You're not alone. Not here, not while I can help." The hours passed, and Monique continued running her diner, all while keeping one eye on the door. Occasionally, she would peek back into the room where Jack was resting. She noticed him finally beginning to relax a little, though his eyes never fully stopped scanning for danger. Around mid-afternoon, there was a sudden sound outside, a loud engine roaring down the street. Monique stiffened. She moved to the window, trying to see without being obvious. A group of bikers passed by, their motorcycles loud and imposing. They didn't stop, but the sight made her heart pound. She knew that Jack's life was connected to people like them, but she also knew that trouble often followed this kind of presence. Jack's face turned pale. "They're here," he muttered. Monique placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. They're just passing by. We're safe here." He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Thanks," he whispered. "I didn't expect anyone to care enough to hide me. Most people see me and assume I'm trouble." Monique shook her head. "People are complicated. So are situations. But you're human. You deserve safety just like anyone else." The rest of the afternoon was a mix of normal diner activity and quiet tension. A few customers came and went, unaware of the drama in the back room. Monique continued to serve with her usual warmth, chatting with people, making small talk, and keeping everything looking perfectly ordinary. But in the back, Jack remained hidden, eating, drinking, and gathering strength for what was to come. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Monique thought about the night ahead. She knew the authorities might come back, and she knew Jack couldn't stay hidden forever. She didn't want to panic, but she needed to prepare. She started moving tables and chairs subtly to create more space and to block views from the small window in the back. She gathered extra blankets and a flashlight, small measures that could make a big difference if someone tried to force entry. Jack noticed her activity. "You're really going all out," he said, his voice softer now, almost admiring. "I told you," Monique said with a faint smile. "I'm not leaving you alone. We do what we can and we face it together." He nodded, still watching her carefully. Most people wouldn't risk this for me," he said, shaking his head slightly. Monique shrugged. "People are capable of more than they think. And sometimes doing the right thing isn't about risk, it's about heart." I've done my fair share of taking care of people who had nowhere else to go. Today it's you." Night began to fall and the diner quieted even more. The last few customers left, waving and smiling at Monique as they went. She closed the front door, turning the lock with a sense of cautious relief. She went back to the back room where Jack was finally starting to look a little more comfortable. "You can rest now," she said. "I'll keep watch. You don't need to move unless it's absolutely necessary." Jack sank back into the chair, exhaustion evident on his face. "I don't know what I would have done without you today," he said, voice low but sincere. "You don't have to know everything," Monique replied. "You just have to know that someone's got your back. That's enough for now." They sat in silence for a moment, a quiet companionship forming between them. Monique thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought him into her diner, the way one ordinary morning had turned into something extraordinary. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but she knew she would face it with courage. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the diner. The town seemed calm, unaware of the tension hidden within the walls. But Monique could feel that this was only the beginning. The days ahead would test her, test Jack, and test the limits of trust, loyalty, and courage. For now, though, they had a small moment of peace. Jack rested and Monique kept watch. They were two people from very different worlds, brought together by circumstance yet connected by a shared understanding. Sometimes helping someone was worth every risk. And in that quiet back room, amidst the hum of the diner's fridge and the faint smell of coffee, Monique made a silent promise to herself. She would not fail him. She would not let fear dictate her actions. The night stretched on, and as Monique glanced toward the door for what felt like the 100th time, she realized something important. Courage wasn't just about facing the obvious dangers. Sometimes it was about quiet decisions made in the middle of ordinary life, about protecting someone when the world wanted them exposed. That was the kind of courage she had today, and she knew deep down that the next day would bring more challenges, ones that would demand even more strength, wisdom, and heart. But for now, Monique allowed herself a small, steadying breath. They had survived the day. They had created a temporary sanctuary, and in a world full of uncertainties, that was enough to keep hope alive. The next morning, Monique woke early as usual, the soft light of dawn spilling through the diner windows. She moved around the kitchen, flipping pancakes, brewing coffee, and preparing for the day ahead. Her heart was heavier than usual, though. She knew it wouldn't be long before the authorities came back looking for Jack. Her diner had become a safe place, but safe was temporary. Danger was waiting, and she could feel it in the quiet morning air. Jack, who had spent most of the night trying to rest, was already awake in the back room. He sat quietly, sipping coffee that Monique had brought him, his eyes fixed on the small window that looked out onto the street. She could tell he was nervous, his body tense, ready to react at the first sign of trouble. Monique had come to understand his anxiety. It was like a second skin to him now. "You don't have to be scared," she said softly as she approached him. "I'll take care of things here. You just focus on staying calm." He looked at her, a faint smile breaking through his tired expression. "I don't even know how to thank you," he said. "Most people wouldn't risk this for someone like me." Monique shook her head. "It's not about thanks. It's about doing what's right. And right now that means keeping you safe." For a moment, silence filled the room. The diner was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of a car passing outside. Monique glanced at the door, then back at Jack. She had been thinking all night about what she would do if the authorities came again. She had prepared small things like extra blankets and hiding spots, but she knew it might not be enough. She had to rely on her courage, her instincts, and a calm mind. It wasn't long before she heard it, the familiar sound of a patrol car slowing down outside. Her stomach tightened. Monique went to the front of the diner, pretending everything was normal while her eyes followed the car's movements. The officers didn't get out immediately. They drove slowly down the street, glancing at shop windows and the few people walking by. But she knew they were watching, looking for anything unusual. Monique returned to the back room, keeping her voice low so Jack wouldn't panic. "They're out there," she whispered. "But don't worry. I've got a plan." Jack looked at her, anxiety etched across his face. "What plan?" "You stay here," she said firmly. "I'll handle whatever happens outside." You've already done enough by staying calm. I need you to keep doing that." He nodded, though his hands were trembling slightly. Monique gave him a reassuring smile. "I've been through situations like this before. You just focus on being quiet and trust me." Monique moved back to the front of the diner, keeping a calm demeanor. The officers were now approaching the door, and she could feel the tension rising. She walked slowly to the counter, adjusting her apron and smiling at them as if everything was ordinary. "Good morning, officers," she said cheerfully. "Can I help you?" One of them stepped forward, his tone a mix of suspicion and authority. "We're looking for a man. He's connected to some serious charges. Seen anyone suspicious here?" Monique shook her head slowly, maintaining eye contact without fear. "No, sir. Just regular customers enjoying breakfast." "I haven't seen anyone out of the ordinary." The officer's eyes narrowed, scanning the diner. Monique stayed calm, keeping her body relaxed but ready. She noticed her few regulars watching from their seats, some looking concerned but none interfering. Her heart beat faster, but she didn't let it show. They lingered a little longer, asking questions about customers and times, their tone slightly impatient. Monique answered everything politely, without giving them any reason to suspect. She could feel Jack's anxiety from the back room, like a shadow pressing down on her. She clenched her jaw slightly, reminding herself she couldn't let fear control her actions. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. After several tense minutes, the officers finally left, muttering to each other as they walked back to their car. Monique exhaled quietly, keeping her composure in front of the remaining customers. She returned to the back room to check on Jack, who was still sitting quietly, his body tense. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, running a hand over his face. "I think so," he said. "You really have nerves of steel." Monique shrugged. "I've learned to stay calm under pressure. It helps me think clearly and keep others safe. You just focus on keeping quiet." Jack managed a faint smile, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I don't know how you do it," he said quietly. "I don't have a choice," Monique replied. "Sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to act and we don't get the luxury of fear. You'll learn that too if you keep going like this." The rest of the afternoon was a mixture of normal diner activity and quiet vigilance. Monique continued to serve her customers, flipping pancakes and refilling coffee cups, all while keeping an eye on the door. She noticed that Jack had finally relaxed a little, though his eyes never fully stopped scanning for danger. Around mid-afternoon, a few more cars slowed outside, and she recognized a couple of strangers glancing at the diner as if they were searching for someone. Her heart raced, but she stayed calm, taking a deep breath and continuing her work. She knew she had to project confidence. Fear could make the smallest person look guilty, and she couldn't let that happen. Monique moved silently toward the back room and whispered to Jack, "We might have some visitors soon. Stay calm, stay hidden. Don't make a sound." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll try," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She returned to the front, pretending nothing was happening. The strangers walked past the diner slowly, their eyes scanning each window. Monique served a couple of customers, chatting normally, her hands steady despite the racing of her heart. After a few tense minutes, the strangers moved on, leaving the street quiet again. Monique went back to the back room, leaning against the wall. "See, everything's fine. You're safe," she said gently. Jack took a deep breath, finally allowing himself to relax a little more. "I don't know how I got this lucky," he said. "Most people would have handed me over in a second." Monique shook her head. "It's not about luck. It's about choice. I chose to help you. You have to choose to stay calm and trust that someone is looking out for you. That's all it takes right now." They sat in silence for a while, a quiet understanding forming between them. Monique thought about how strange life could be, how one ordinary morning could turn into something extraordinary, where trust and courage became the most valuable things in the world. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she had made the right choice by protecting Jack. Evening approached, and the diner was nearly empty. The last few customers waved goodbye, leaving Monique and Jack in the quiet stillness. She began to prepare a small dinner for him, setting it on the table in the back room. "Eat something," she said. "You need energy if we're going to make it through the next day." He took a small bite, still looking wary. "You're really something," he said softly. "I don't think anyone else would have done this." Monique smiled faintly. "People are capable of more than they think." Sometimes it just takes one decision to show it. Today that decision was mine. But tomorrow, who knows? Jack looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and awe in his eyes. I don't even know how to repay you, he said quietly. You don't have to, she replied. Just survive. That's repayment enough? The night fell slowly over the town. Monique stayed in the diner, keeping watch while Jack rested in the back room. She thought about what might come next, about the authorities, about the danger that lingered beyond the walls. But she also felt a sense of quiet pride. Courage wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet decisions made when nobody else was watching, when fear threatened to take over and you chose to act anyway. For Monique, courage had a name, Jack, and she wasn't about to let him face the world alone. Not now, not ever. As the lights dimmed in the diner and the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the room, Monique allowed herself a small, steadying breath. They had survived the day. They had created a temporary sanctuary. And though the next day would bring even greater challenges, she knew that together, they could face anything. The next morning began quietly, with the soft light of dawn spilling through the diner windows. Monique moved around the kitchen as usual, brewing coffee, flipping pancakes, and arranging plates, all while keeping one eye on the street outside. The night had been calm, but she knew that calm could vanish at any moment. Jack, the man she had been protecting, had slept for a few hours, but his nervous energy had returned. He kept glancing toward the door and windows as if expecting trouble to arrive at any second. Monique set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. Eat up, she said gently. You'll need strength for the day. I have a feeling today is going to be different. Jack took a small bite, chewing slowly, his eyes darting to the window again. Different how? He asked, his voice tense. Monique shook her head. I don't know yet. But trust me, you'll understand soon enough. Just stay calm and keep eating. The diner slowly filled with the usual morning crowd. Regulars coming in for breakfast before heading to work. A few travelers stopping in for a quick meal. Monique served them with her usual warmth, chatting, laughing, and keeping the atmosphere ordinary. She knew that whatever happened outside, she had to keep everything looking normal. Panic would give the wrong impression, and the wrong impression could be dangerous. Around mid-morning, she heard the faint roar of motorcycles in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat. She moved to the front, peeking through the windows to see what was happening. Then she saw them. Dozens of motorcycles coming down the street, their engines loud and powerful. Her stomach tightened and she felt a mix of fear and curiosity. Jack's face went pale. They're here, he muttered under his breath. Monique put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It's okay, she said softly. Just stay calm. I'll handle this. The motorcycles stopped outside the diner, forming an intimidating line in front of the building. One by one, the bikers dismounted, leather jackets gleaming in the sunlight, patches on their backs identifying them as Hell's Angels. They didn't enter the diner immediately. They seemed to be assessing the situation, looking around as if confirming something. Monique took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay composed. The first biker stepped forward, a tall man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He looked directly at Monique. You're the one who helped him, he said in a low, commanding voice. Monique's heart raced, but she nodded. Yes, she replied calmly. I helped him because he needed it. That's all I did. The biker studied her for a moment. Then a small smile appeared on his face. You have guts, he said. Not many people would do what you did. We appreciate it. Monique blinked in surprise. Appreciate it? She asked. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was the right thing to do. The biker nodded. That's exactly why we respect you. He turned to the others, and soon the bikers began filing into the diner. Monique braced herself, unsure if their arrival would be hostile or friendly. But instead of aggression, they moved with purpose, surveying the diner, greeting her, and settling in as if the diner had always been theirs to enter. Jack looked at them nervously. I didn't expect this many, he whispered. Monique shook her head. I didn't either. But look at their faces, they're not here to hurt us. They're here because of what we did. The bikers spoke quietly among themselves, but their tone carried a sense of gratitude and respect. One of them approached Jack and clapped him on the shoulder. You're lucky to have someone like her, he said, glancing at Monique. Not many people would risk themselves for you. Jack's eyes filled with relief and awe. I don't know what to say, he muttered. "You don't need to say anything," Monique replied softly. "Just stay safe." The bikers then began interacting with the diner in ways Monique hadn't expected. Some helped her move tables to make room for everyone, while others cleaned the floors or helped bring out orders. They were respectful, careful, and clearly there to support, not intimidate. Monique watched in disbelief as her diner transformed into a space filled with energy, laughter, and camaraderie. One of the bikers handed her a small box. "For you," he said. "A little thank you for what you did." Monique opened it to find a few simple gifts, tools for the diner, a few special ingredients, and a handwritten note expressing their gratitude. She felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't expected. This was not just a gesture. It was an acknowledgement of courage, of doing the right thing when it mattered most. As the morning turned into afternoon, the bikers stayed in the diner chatting with Monique and Jack, sharing stories from the road, and laughing with the few regulars who remained. The atmosphere, though intense, was surprisingly calm. Monique realized that this unexpected event had changed everything. Her diner had become more than a place for food. It had become a sanctuary, a place where courage and kindness were recognized and rewarded. Jack finally relaxed, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I can't believe this," he said. "All these people, for me?" Monique shook her head. "Not just for you," she said. "They're here because of both of you. Courage and kindness are rare, and they recognize it when they see it." The bikers began to prepare to leave as the afternoon sun climbed higher. Before they did, the tall biker who had first spoken to Monique approached her again. "We won't forget this," he said. "You have our respect and our protection. If anyone ever tries to harm you or him, we'll be there." Monique nodded, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. "But I hope it never comes to that." As the last of the bikers mounted their motorcycles and rode away, the roar of engines fading down the street, Monique looked at Jack. "See?" she said softly. "Everything's going to be okay. You're safe now, at least for today." Jack nodded, still processing everything. "I can't believe this," he said quietly. "You saved me, and now they've all come because of you." Monique smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes doing the right thing brings its own kind of reward. Not money, not fame, just respect. That's more powerful than most people realize." The diner returned to its quiet normalcy after the bikers left. Monique served the few remaining customers, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. But now there was a different feeling in the air. Her diner had changed, and so had she. She felt stronger, more certain of her ability to protect those in need, even against overwhelming odds. Jack sat quietly in the back room, finally at ease. He looked at Monique with gratitude and admiration. I don't know how to repay you," he said softly. "You don't need to," she replied. "Just live your life, stay safe. That's enough for me." As the evening approached, Monique cleaned the diner, reflecting on the extraordinary events of the day. A simple act of kindness had grown into something much larger than she could have imagined. The bikers had come not for trouble, but for gratitude and recognition. They had shown her that courage and loyalty were noticed, that even small actions could ripple out in ways she had never expected. Monique felt a quiet sense of pride and hope. Today had been a test of courage, of trust, and of moral strength. And she had passed it. The bond she had formed with Jack and the bikers was a reminder that standing up for what was right could change lives, protect people, and create connections that went beyond words. As she closed the diner for the night, Monique glanced out at the empty street. The town was quiet, the sun low in the sky, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. She thought about the future and the challenges that might come, but for now she allowed herself a small smile. Today she had made a difference. Today she had proven that courage and kindness could be stronger than fear. Jack sat in the back room, finally resting without the weight of constant worry. He looked at Monique, gratitude shining in his eyes. He didn't need to say anything. They both knew that this day would be remembered, not for the fear, but for the courage and trust that had kept them safe. And for Monique, that was enough. The morning sun spilled through the diner windows, casting a warm golden glow over the room. Monique moved about the kitchen with a calm confidence, preparing coffee, frying eggs, and setting plates on the counter. The day had started quietly, but she knew that things had changed forever. Yesterday had been extraordinary, and today would be the start of a new normal. Jack was sitting quietly in the back room, eating a simple breakfast Monique had prepared. The tension that had haunted him for days had eased considerably, replaced by a cautious optimism. He glanced toward the windows, then back at Monique. "I can't believe everything that happened yesterday," he said softly. "I never thought people like that would come to help." "Not like that," Monique smiled faintly. "People can surprise you," she said. "Sometimes the world is full of kindness even when it doesn't seem like it." Jack nodded, taking another bite of his food. "And all of this, it's because of you," he said. "I don't even know how to repay you." "You don't need to," Monique replied firmly. "You survived. That's all the repayment I need." The diner slowly filled with the morning crowd. Regulars came in, chatting and laughing, oblivious to the extraordinary events of the previous day. Monique moved among them, serving coffee and pancakes, maintaining the usual warmth that made her diner feel like home. But she could feel a new energy in the room. People had noticed something had changed, even if they didn't know what it was. There was a quiet respect in the way some of the regulars looked at her, a recognition that she had done something remarkable. Around mid-morning, the distant roar of motorcycles caught her attention. She glanced toward the windows and saw familiar figures approaching. It was the Hells Angels returning, not for confrontation, but for a gesture that filled her with both pride and relief. One by one, they parked their bikes in front of the diner and dismounted, moving with a sense of purpose. Monique's heart pounded as she watched them enter. The first biker, the tall man who had spoken to her yesterday, approached her. "We're back," he said with a small smile. "Not because of trouble. We just wanted to make sure you're okay and to thank you again for what you did." Monique felt a warmth in her chest. "I'm fine," she said. "Really I am, but I appreciate you coming back." The bikers moved through the diner, greeting her politely and interacting with Jack, who looked both nervous and amazed. They were not threatening, not imposing, just grateful. Some of them brought small gifts. Others offered to help with chores around the diner. It was an unusual scene, and Monique couldn't help but smile at the absurdity and the beauty of it. "You really don't realize what you did," the tall biker said to her quietly. "Not many people would have the courage to stand up the way you did. And now people know. Word spreads fast in our world." Monique shook her head. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do." He nodded. "That's exactly why it matters. You don't need to understand it all. Just know that your actions made a difference, more than you realize." Jack looked around the diner, still processing the sight of so many bikers. I can't believe this," he said softly. "All of this and for me?" Monique placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Not just for you," she said gently. "It's for both of you." Courage and kindness are noticed even in the smallest ways. The morning passed with laughter and conversation. The bikers shared stories of their travels, of the road, of their experiences. Monique listened, occasionally joining in but mostly observing the way Jack's tension had dissolved. For the first time in weeks, he smiled freely, no longer haunted by fear. Monique felt a sense of accomplishment and quiet relief. By midday, the bikers began to prepare to leave. They gathered at the door, mounting their motorcycles, but before they rode off, the tall biker approached Monique one last time. "We won't forget this," he said. "If anyone ever tries to harm you or him, we'll be there. You have our respect and our protection." Monique nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and pride. "Thank you," she said simply. "I hope it never comes to that." As the last of the bikers rode away, their engines fading down the street, the diner returned to its quiet rhythm. Monique served the remaining customers, cleaned the tables, and reflected on the extraordinary events of the past 2 days. Her diner had become more than just a place for food. It had become a symbol of courage, trust, and humanity. Jack stayed in the back room, finally at ease. He looked at Monique, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I don't even know how to